And thank you for joining us. Today is a City of Hardeeville City Council workshop, 205 Main Street, Hardeeville, South Carolina, Tuesday, February 24th, 2026 at 10:40 a.m. Just as a reminder, this is a workshop. The rules of order are relaxed. Everyone can speak when they want to, but please respect the previous speaker and wait until they yield the floor before you jump in. Let's go with Mr. Gruber. Lead us away.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. Good afternoon, or good morning. So pleased to be able to stand before you today and present a couple of things for your consideration. The first thing that we are going to talk about today is an update to our employee policy handbook. So this is the document that we require all staff to sign, indicating that they understand what our expectations are about their performance as a member of our staff. And so this is a document that should be periodically reviewed. It should be updated as needed to make sure that we're current in terms of both of our practices and our policies. And so ultimately, I'm going to turn this over to Neil Parsons, Assistant City Manager, to kind of walk you through the process and how we went about developing these recommendations. And then we'll invite Pam to come up and discuss with you the policy changes that we are asking you to consider. And then ultimately, we'll turn it over to you for any questions and answers that you may have about this document. So with that, I'll invite Neil to come up and talk about how we went about creating this proposed draft for your consideration.
Good morning, Mayor and Council.
Good morning.
These, as what we sent out last week for you guys to review was basically a copy of the employee handbook as been updated. And also we included a kind of a two-sheeter white paper as far as process of what led us to this point. So as we know that we need to update the employee manual from time to time, periodically as needed, based on whether it's new things in place, change administrations, change of councils, something of that sort. So it had been, even though we've kind of done our periodical reviews in from time to time, the last one that updated was around that 21-22 year point. So it was it was needed. So with this process, I mean, it's basically, we try to save the employees, try to save the city, try to save our resources, make everybody safe, and then also how to operate the organization and stuff as most efficiently as possible. So with that being said, I mean, the committee that was formed to kind of look at this included the deputy city manager, myself. We had the city clerk, we had the human resource director. We had the fire chief, we had the assistant police chief, we had the accounting manager. I'm just wanting to make sure, and for us to do this, I mean, when I actually looked at the calendar, I mean, this is a 12-month process, and it was like, wow. I mean, we actually took but this is a thorough review. The previous employee handbook was much longer. I mean, it had a lot of information in it. So our task was to make sure that we kind of got more precise with the information and stuff presented. So we went page by page, line by line, and went through that review process for 12 months. And then with that same period, what we did was we utilized the template from MASC that they said, this is what we recommend. We also looked at some of our neighboring municipalities, some of their templates and stuff as well, some of their actual approved plans, just to make sure that we were on the same page. We know we're a growing city. Things have changed for us quite a bit. And, and we were pretty comfortable that our existing plan actually covered a lot of the information, but we had to kind of go through the process, kind of tidy that up and get to the point and stuff where you got a product in hand and stuff now. During that meantime, I mean, we had those members stuff working on that work group committee. The city manager, we would ask him, bring him in from time to time to review, give us direction and stuff as needed. And so we included him as much as possible. When we had our drafting stuff done, we also had a labor attorney and stuff take the time and stuff, which is paid through our partnership with Smurfit Smith. They went through and actually identified, some things and stuff as far as improvements. We went through, we made the recommended changes and stuff there. Still, it made sure that it's still, in line with what the city and stuff moving forward. Then also we took it to the department directors. They also reviewed it. and made some recommendations, and that group would go back through the document and review those recommendations and make a decision on whether or not that should be included or not. So with that being said, we're very, very happy with the product that we turned out. And I know that Pam will come up and talk about a little bit about the changes and stuff that was recommended. But I mean, before I sit down, any questions for me about the process? So.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
mainly, did you make drastic changes or just kind of fine tune it from what it used to be?
It's mostly fine-tuned changes. I mean, we brought more clarity in place, more concisiveness in place, and made sure that document represented us moving forward the best we possibly could. So,
I do have a question. You know, I went through it. Is this the place to, you know, technology's changing everything. Is this the place for social media, use of AI, any use of technology? Is this the place for it, or is that separate?
so what happens is that it basically ends up being, this is the employee handbook. So it does touch on some of those. And what happens but you've got further policies that detail further, that captures more about just the social media type policy or something of that sort. So we capture the highlights. We say most everything that social media says, but then there's actually a formal document too that says here's the policy or the SOPs outside of the employee handbook.
So that's a separate document.
Separate, but we do cover information here that does represent that. So yes, sir.
So perhaps, if I could make a suggestion, it'd be, since we do have a policy, put it as Appendix A or Appendix B.
Yeah,
Because I think it's really important that we have very clear policy with the use of AI and the use of
Yes, sir.
social media, and that we all understand, including us up here.
Yes, sir.
You know, what it is, and, you know, what is good common sense.
And when we have a printed version of stuff that you all see in front of you, but also what we're going to do is move this into Power DMS, which is the online type portal that everybody can see. And it's going to be much easier for us to work through each of the sections, even to the appendices sections themselves, because we can go straight to that appendix. So,
Okay, thank you.
yes, sir.
No, I was just going to introduce you.
Oh, good morning, Mayor and Council. So, I don't have.
State your name and address for the public. I'm just trying to follow policy, fam.
Address 205 Main Street, Hardyville. So, social media, I did not put that in these couple of slides that I got up here, but we do have a section in the policy, and it talks about what our employees can and cannot do and how they should conduct themselves as far as social media is concerned.
Thank you.
So the first one we want to discuss is the open door policy dispute resolution. And what that is before we didn't have a way for employees to submit complaints or grievances. So we've added that to this new policy. And what it will do is it will foster an open communication, an environment of trust, mutual respect that creates a solid foundation for collaboration, growth, and high performance that leads to success. So what this policy does, it gives the employee the avenue to express their concerns. What we'd like them to do is first express those concerns with the department. And then if they're not satisfied with that, then they'll go to the next level in their chain of command, possibly to HR, and that will lead to Josh eventually if the problem is not solved at those levels. You have any questions about that?
I'm just going to add some
You wanna-
commentary.
okay.
So this is one area where we receive some guidance from the outside attorney. And just so that you kind of understand big picture, under state law, there is a mandatory requirement for county governments to have what's called a grievance committee. So it's a committee made up of staff members who will sit and formally hear grievances that are filed by staff for things like promotions, demotions, terminations, discipline, other similar matters like that. The recommendation from the labor and employment law attorney was that the city do not create something like that. One, because the statutes don't require it, and two, under our form of government, and Pam kind of alluded to it, my responsibility is to oversee all staff. And so if there is an internal dispute, ultimately that recommendation or report is going to come to me, and it's my responsibility to then take action on it, not the committee's. And so what we are proposing here is to have a process that allows for somebody to have essentially their concerns heard, but in a manner that keeps it within the council manager form of government and ultimately puts it back in my lap as the head of the organization to make a decision at the outcome. So just understand kind of the nuances between why we're proposing this open door policy rather than a formal grievance.
Aliens?
There we go.
Okay. Do you have any questions about this open door policy dispute resolution that we're, none? Okay.
Is that any difference than what kind of always has been?
Not particularly, it's just now being written down.
Okay.
Before we didn't have anything.
Okay.
This follows quite, in the corporate world, the same policies. Okay, that's fine.
So the next update is up under the travel policy, the per diem. Currently, we submit receipts for reimbursement, but here in this proposed version, we're asking that anyone who needs travel.
My apologies. Okay.
Oh,
Go
Okay.
back one, right?
go back. Oh. So the per diem, say what?
You can grab that box and move it out of your way, Pam.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, just minimize.
So what we're asking is that in the event of travel, that there is a pre-authorization from employees and staff. And they will get a check up front for their travel costs instead of having to keep up with all the receipts and turn them in after travel. It'll just make the process easier.
Is this applied to council?
No, sir. This is purely for employees. Council is treated separately in that any expenses related to your official positions, be it travel, training, reimbursement, what have you, those are provided separately under this policy. This is only for employees, and really what we're doing is we're changing how we go about providing reimbursement. So currently what we require is a staff employee, if they are in authorized training or travel, they were to get the receipts from their meals to bring them back and to submit them. I'm not a fan of that, primarily because that only puts more burden on our staff to track and reconcile to make sure that it is the right amount. There also could be situations where it creates perception issues for us. I'll try to give you a good example of that. If you go to a training in Atlanta because you're meeting with some federal regulatory agency and you decide that you want to go out to dinner at Hooters, that is certainly your right. I don't need to see your receipt for dinner at Hooters. I just need to know that if you're on travel and you get paid a reimbursement for the per diem rate that is in the Atlanta metro area, if you spend one breakfast, one lunch, and one dinner there, it's a fixed amount no matter where you go.
That was gonna be my next question.
Correct. So rather than basing it on reimbursements on actual cost, it's the formula for whatever metropolitan area you're in based upon the General Services Administration of the federal government. They identify all of the lodging rates and all of the per diem rates for meals and expenses. And then it just depends on how long you're spending there. And so first and last days are always 75%. So typically you'll catch breakfast and dinner, or you'll catch lunch and dinner for the first day, but not breakfast because you're traveling. And then vice versa, it would be breakfast and lunch, but not dinner because you're traveling. So it's a formula to try to be accurate, but to take away essentially the responsibility of tracking all receipts and then turning those in for reimbursement.
I did not know the government kept track of all of that, but
So is there something wrong with Hooters? The way, you,
PC example,
you,
worse from there.
okay, okay.
If our citizens were to formula that, they might not appreciate we went to dinner at Hooters.
Okay.
it's been an issue in other places because they do make a deal.
Yeah. So, the finance department is asking that there's a 2-week turnaround on requests for travel that allows them time to process the check requests and whatnot.
Let me make sure I understand one thing about the per diem. What I heard you say, Josh, is there's a menu for each place that people go, and that would be based on that, and that's what people would use.
Yeah, give you a good example of that. If we had travel that was up in Bishopville, the cost of buying a meal there is going to be cheaper than what it would be if you were in Washington, D.C. And so the General Services Administration publishes a schedule, and it's based typically upon metropolitan areas. But depending upon where you're traveling, you just look up what the per diem rate is for that particular location, and then you just plug it into the travel authorization form.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
I didn't know that was possible, but that's pretty
Just to chime in on that too, our document has the links built into that. So they'll click on the link, it'll pop it up that shows them. So they're not out searching and stuff for this information. It's all available at their fingertips. So, yeah.
Yeah, that'll be available on the electronic version of that when it's put in the Power DMS. Okay, next we want to talk about bereavement. During our research and during this time of updating the policy, we found that our counterparts had increased their bereavement days from 3 to 5. And we felt like that was a necessary change. It will allow our employees to grieve or breathe a little bit while they're trying to handle affairs during the time of that time of need. And also, we're suggesting that the bereavement day match the schedule. Like if I'm a firefighter, I get a 24-hour bereavement day. Or if I work for police at 12 hours, I get a 12-hour bereavement day. And then our regular full-time employees will get the 8-hour day for 5 days. Any questions about changes to the bereavement? No?
It does, and it helps morale and stuff with somebody's in.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's one of those things that will come up, and what we're seeing is the average amount of time that it takes to typically travel somewhere, to have a viewing, to have a funeral, to then, sometimes you have to work on the estates of the people that have passed, and that takes time, and so we're not trying to short anybody time. We want to give them an adequate amount to allow them to focus on their families, and so that's what's really behind this change.
I like the idea that it's being set up based on their normal working day, the 8, 12, or 24.
To make it
That
fair.
makes sense. It makes it even for each position. The clarity is there.
I have a curiosity question, not a judgmental one. Is there a definition of what type of family member,
It's immediate family. What it does not include is like cousins, aunts, uncles. But when you have children, your spouse, your in-laws, those are included. Yeah, step-in-laws. Stepchildren. Yes, yeah.
Okay. No, I'm just curious.
To expand on what the mayor has started, there will be situations where somebody may not have been raised by parents. It could have been a grandmother, or it could have been her aunt or uncle. We do recognize that fact.
Yes.
We do. So under the section as currently drafted, it would be for the funeral member of an immediate family member, which is defined as a spouse, a parent, a child, a grandparent, a grandchild, brother, sister, parent-in-law, grandparent-in-law, brother-in-law, sister-in-law, step-parents, stepchildren, stepbrothers, stepsisters.
Okay. Any more questions on bereavement? Here's the big one, PTO changes. So what you see on the screen is what we have currently, under that first column is broken out 0 to 10 years, and it takes 2 paychecks, 1 day and 4 hours to earn, a day off. So what we're proposing, which would be on the right-hand side, is that for retention purposes, we move it from 0 to 10 years to 0 to 5 years. And what this will do, it will increase the amount of PTO earned for non-exempt 40-hour employees and non-exempt 43-hour, non-exempt 53-hour employees by 1 hour. And it will also, what we're proposing makes it fair to public safety because of the difference in their shift schedules. Like if you have a firefighter that works 24 hours and he's not even earning a day in a pay period. So it would align and be more fair to public safety if we made this change.
Yeah, what we kind of came across is our prior schedule was really based around an assumption that there was an 8-hour day. And that's obviously not the case for our public safety personnel. And so from a proportional standpoint, they were not accruing leave at the same rate as 8-hour employees were. And so the changes to this calculation have been done so that proportionately those two things would be in balance, and that does result in an increase. And in a moment, I'm going to ask John Boyle to come forward, and who's going to talk about kind of what the financial impacts of that change are. But this is definitely the biggest change from a policy standpoint that we are proposing in this round. But happy to answer any questions that you may have about why we're looking at proposing this.
Can we ask a question about this right now?
Yes.
The accrual of time, and then vacation. My question is there the option you hear in a lot of companies, if you don't use it, you lose it, meaning that we want people to take vacation and we don't want the responsibility of all that accrual. So when someone resigns, we find out that we owe them 100 hours of vacation things. And I'm curious where we are with that.
So in our current policy, our employees are required to take 40 hours in a year. So that's a requirement. If they don't take that, then I believe they do lose that. So,
So it's use it, lose it.
yes.
We do have that, but there's also some guardrails that are put in place. Now, this does get a little bit complicated because we have some legacy employees that were under prior programs, because this has been changed by councils over time. And so what our current policy says is if you were hired prior to January 1st, 2018, you can accrue up to a maximum of 720 hours. After that point is when you hit the use it or lose it. And so we do certainly allow for a very large accumulation for everybody else who was hired after that date. The maximum accrual hours is 480 hours. So while this would change the rate at which the accruals are coming forward, it would not change the maximum amount of hours that you are allowed to bank. So one, we're going to encourage staff to use their leave time. I certainly stress with them maintaining a good work-life balance. We have leave, that's why we provide it. And we want to avoid a situation that I've seen in other jurisdictions, which is primarily in some of your more senior staff, because they're accruing at a rate that is higher than other staff members. They reach a point where their schedules are so busy that they can't take leave, but they don't want to lose the leave either. And so you basically lose that employee for the entire month of December because they're trying to use their leave before they lose it. And that's not effective for us from an operational standpoint. And so I'm going to be working with staff to make sure that they are taking their leave throughout the year because we provide it. And the city had the foresight to offer a leave buyback program. It is not at dollar for dollar. It is less than $1. I think it's 80 cents on the dollar. 85 cents on the dollar. But it's an opportunity for an employee to say, if you don't want to use that time, you still don't necessarily lose it. You can cash that in at a reduced rate.
So an employee can accrue 480 hours. Is that the total life of their employment?
Yes.
For public safety. Public safety, I'm sorry, because I needed to read down a little bit further. For all 8-hour-a-day employees, 480s is the max. For public safety employees, the 12-hour and 24-hour shifts, 504 is the maximum.
So that's the life cycle of the entire employment period?
If they go over the 5-4, they don't get to carry that over. They either use it or lose it, but they do get to accrue 504 hours. Yes.
So they accrue it, that's the max they get. If they get more than that, they have to use it or lose it.
That's correct.
That way it keeps the liability for the city down too. 'Cause
Sure.
I remember in the old days that used to be.
Yeah, well,
John's going
Oh,
to
man.
John's going to touch on the financial implications of this, but we do maintain a specific line item in our budget for buyout purposes, and we adjust that every year based upon kind of what we anticipate from an employment standpoint.
I have one question. It falls within this. Is there a vehicle within our manual to allow employees to transfer PTO hours to other employees? I mean, it can happen with this, so we do that.
Do have a PTO donation policy.
Okay,
And
that's right.
it
that's
allows
important.
employees to donate to that employee in need as needed.
Okay,
Up to
thank
40
you.
hours.
So the policy that you have in front of you, we've always had that PTO donation
Yeah.
policy in place. We've kind of changed that up a little bit, saying that we have a PTO bank in place. And for instance, that way everybody has a chance. Don't matter who it is. If you want to give to that bank, they shouldn't be, because you're so and so, you're getting more hours, whatever. That way they have the ability to transfer it to the bank. The bank has the ability to help whoever needs it at any given time. So.
This last slide is still PTO. It was just that all of our exempt staff, for the life of their employment, they only earn 9.28 hours. So we're suggesting that at the 10-year mark, they be able to advance in how many hours they can earn. Any more questions about PTO? I know you're excited to hear the money piece from John. John? Bull?
Thanks for the stellar introduction.
yeah.
Change your pen. Thank you. Good morning, council. It's good to talk to you. I'm just going to find my presentation here, some of which was has been touched on by the other three speakers, so I'll try to just gloss over those. On my first page of this presentation, you have you'll see for the past, Neil said these first three bullets. There's been a team of people who've been working on this for the last 3 months, or the last 12 months. It's been reviewed by the city manager, third-party human resource attorneys, and then Councilmember White has also had a chance to look at it early on in the game too, based on his years of experience in the personnel realm. And then, of course, the city manager's already given council a briefing on this. One change in the manual, that's a big number that Josh asked me to talk to y'all about, is the cost of these additional accruals that Pam just walked you through is going to be about $300,000. Now, when I say cost, that's the value of that time. That's not expense that the city is going to see every year. And it sounds like, fancy, we're trying to be, slick or anything, but it's really not. There's a difference between what we have to accrue according to this policy and then what the city anticipates spending every year. That's what that's what I'm here to talk about. So the policy manual talks about a $300,000 increase in the accrual, but again, the actual expense will be much, and we believe substantially less than the $300,000. Couple of pieces of that, and Pam touched on this a little bit, and so did Neil. For the non-administrative police and fire staff, that's going to be where the bulk of the increased accrual is going to be. Now, for police and fire administrative staff, as well as other administrative staff, there is going to be a bit of an increase in the accrual, but we're not going to see the impacts that you would anticipate. Again, $300,000 is the number that's going to be accrued, but that's not going to be anywhere close to the expense we see each year. Then I put a couple of examples in here. You see that my example is that the city clerk, the accounting manager, permit tag, zoning specialist, most of the people you see in this room, if we take a day off, we have the luxury of just letting people leaving our work to sit so we can catch up when we get back. I say that tongue in cheek, but that is truly the nature of the beast, and it works. And then it's the same thing for should Steve or Scott or Sam take off, or Chief Beckmeyer, same thing. Their work typically is going to they'll have that to review when they get back. Now, for police patrol and firefighters, it's a different story. They have minimum staffing that they have to maintain. It could be legal, but it's certainly in good conscience. You can't have a lightly staffed fire station or too few police officers patrolling. Because again, we're 62 square miles, but we're not a square. We're like bubble gum on a shoe that's been dragged across the southern part of the county. And I say that because I'm not smart enough to come up with a better way to say it. So, but I'm open to suggestions.
Keep working.
I didn't do that much of an inspection. So that said, again, and I'll try not to read word for word. When a member of police patrol takes a day off, they have a number of opportunities to, and I don't mean to speak for police and fire, but they have had a chance to see this and indicated that I'm pretty much in the ballpark. If a member of police is off, the command staff has the opportunity to shift their patrol patterns around to where that person being off is likely not to cause any overtime or any additional costs for that day. Similar nation for a firefighter. If a firehouse has somebody off and they're going to not have the required staffing, Steve and his command staff will have the opportunity to shift somebody from one station to another. Now, we're still paying that person, but we're not accruing any additional overtime generally for that to happen. And then, because if they don't, they have to hold somebody over or call somebody in early to cover those shifts. And that's not a best practice by any stretch. So I just want to touch on that. And then the other thing is, and other speakers have talked about this as well, staff accruing at a higher rate will increase the liability. Now, that's a number that we see in the audit every year. And unfortunately, I didn't walk in here with that. But that's something that we prepare for the auditors, and they review what if at June 30th, what did everybody have? What do they make? And then there's a number, and that goes in the audit. That is a liability, but again, it's not an expense that we're paying every year. Just another thing to touch on is we talked about the employee buyback. The last number of years, we've been budgeting $250,000 for the whole agency for that. We have been under that the last 3 years, and I think that's when we first moved the number to 250. I would anticipate that'll be the number that we have in the upcoming year's budget as well. I'm not running out of breath. I'm coming off a cold, so my staff has been enjoying that. I lose my voice from time to time. And then the other things are this additional staff or leave does enable people to have a little bit more time to address just the things that life brings. And it's not just an illness, it's a ball game, it's a chance to go see your grandchild, whatever it might be. And then, but the leave at the end, as we talked about, we've got the stopgaps in there at 720 hours or 480 hours. that liability is only going to be paid when the employee terminates. So, and then my summary is we're going to accrue $300,000, and the actual expense in any given year will be, I say less than that. I'd be inclined to say substantially less than the $300,000.
Yeah, I see that.
Just out of curiosity's sake, $300,000, and I understand we will be less than that every year. Putting that in context, how much is that compared to our annual employee budget?
Well, that short answer is I don't have that standing here. We could certainly get that.
It's just,
But it's not just the salary.
pardon me?
I said it's gonna be probably less than 1%.
That's the reason I was asking. It's less than 1%. So
Sure.
it's not a huge number. So it's.
Well, when you consider what everybody gets paid, and then the retirement and Social Security and all that, there is some real workers' comp and all that.
Yeah,
That it is a real number. But the 300 is I tried to work with a more of an apples to apples kind of deal.
Okay, thank you.
Looks like I'm about ready to lose my spot. So
It is 2.27%. So our current, and this is just our payroll budget, so not our overall budget, but just payroll budget, our current budget is $13,187,224.
yes, sir.
I have a question about that, John, with, when we have people that we would like to have them take time off for vacation to rejuvenate and rest and things, I think our policy and our desire should be that people take their vacation. There is a issue, though, if you if you carry a vacation day over when you're making X and you are leaving and now it's Y, you're being paid at your rate of pay at Y, not when you earn that vacation. So that liability is something else. So I think that we should have people try and take their vacations as much as possible because they do better. It's been proven when people are taking time off, they're more productive, they do a better job. And I know for me, I just had a thing of not taking time, and it was a mistake on my part when I was in the corporate world.
Well, there's a couple of things to that. The first is I'm aware of one employee who from time to time has maybe not fully taken the 40 hours. And that employee is working hard now on a various number of different ways to take that time off.
Sure.
And that person has over time been talked to by various HR and directors and city managers. I'm confident of that. I can't speak to that. I wasn't in those meetings, but my expectation is that the point was made. And then the other piece of that, though, to your point, Mr. White, that's the age-old challenge of if I earn it when I'm making $10 an hour and I retire when I'm making 11, we don't have an answer for that. Now, I will say,
Take the vacation, that's the answer.
well, yeah, the answer is take the vacation, but it is important to some employees
I
to,
understand that.
hey, my daughter's getting ready to have a baby, or I want to take my dream trip. So I'm not going to use all that I accrue every year, but I also have a cap. Like in my case, it's 480 hours. So I'm liable to be close to that cap because I'm not a young man anymore. I may need to be gone for a couple of weeks, and this way I can be gone and get paid. So
You're young at heart, John.
I try to be, yes, sir. That's what y'all are taking from this? Gum on a shoe? Okay. Yeah.
Josh, I have a more general question, and
Okay. Just be memorable is what they say, right? Okay.
my general question is this, that with redoing the policy, we're still under the employment at will.
Yes. So
And that's very important because with or without notification, with or without cause, is the law.
Yep.
And sometimes when we have a progressive discipline system where I give you a warning, then another warning, and another warning, that is not to be misunderstood, that I have to give you 3 warnings before you can leave. And it's important employees understand that and supervisors. And I'm not doing it as the Grinch here. I'm just saying there's a real
Yes.
difference between the two.
No, those are great points to make. And they're actually 2 points that the labor and employment law attorney kind of hammered home with us. So you see on the face of the document in very clear, bold, underlined language that is no less than a 12-point font, it very clearly states all employees are at-will employees. I am the only exception, and that is because you give me a contract of employment. But everybody else is an at-will employee. And so they will, assuming that you ultimately adopt the update to this handbook, all staff members will be required to sign this, and a copy of it will be in their employment personnel file so that we'll always have it. But we will make it clear at all times that this is not a contract, and they are not contract employees. We look at progressive discipline as a way to try and proportionally respond to a situation, but depending upon the facts and circumstances of that situation, our response may need to be an immediate separation. And so it's not something that we take lightly, but it is a power that we absolutely have because under the right set of circumstances, that may be what's in the best interest of our organization.
And I think the progressive thing is a good thing to have. to
Under
help
most
people develop,
circumstances,
yeah.
it's usually the way to go to address a problem, but it is by no means a mandatory process.
Or a right.
Correct.
And I educate our employees on the at-will and our disciplinary policy at our new hire onboarding. So as they come in, they know about it.
So take the vacation and leave the canoe, yes.
Yeah, right, right, right.
And just as a reminder, our PTO is vacation, sick, all of that. So it's not just, we're not talking about just vacation.
Personal time off, basically.
Correct.
Yeah. Just to make a.
That's okay.
No, because it's a great point. It's a catch-all for all forms of leave. Yeah, including short-term disability. If you go out before your benefits kick in, again, having enough leave in your account allows you to kind of bridge that gap. And so we want to strike a balance between making sure that employees have enough leave without accruing a massive liability that we're going to have to then face at some point in the future. So I think what you have done previously by setting those guardrails was a good step, and we just need to continue to make sure that we're monitoring that. And so that most of our staff, again, we will always have some outliers in terms of who uses or does not use their leave. But our goal is going to be to try to manage that work-life balance and make sure that staff are using their leave appropriately, but also maintaining some. So as an example, in our leave buyback policy, we require you to maintain a minimum amount of hours in your account before you can sell your leave back to us because we want to make sure that that safety net is there for staff.
And I'm happy to continue answering questions or head on back to my seats. It's up to y'all. Thank y'all.
So if there are no more questions on the employee handbook, what we would propose to do is add this as an agenda item to your upcoming council meeting. It's not a requirement by state law that you approve this, but I think it's a good thing to outwardly show it so the public's aware of it. They understand what policies and procedures we're going to adhere staff to, and then staff can understand that you support those policies and have adopted them as well.
Thank you.
All right, so let's go back and pick up our discussion of the salary and compensation study. And so I want to first start. Don, thank you so much for holding on the line here while we've been getting ourselves organized. So Don Long with the Management Advisory Group is here to basically talk to you about the study that we asked them to perform. As you're aware, you authorized us to seek out a firm who would help us identify a couple of items. First, our baseline salaries. That has been done to compare us to not only other employers in our region, but employers across the state. And so Don will talk about all the different data points that they've used on that analysis. I'll then bring Pam back up to talk about the recommendations from the study and what is being proposed to be implemented. And then again, we'll have John back clean up in terms of talking about the financial implications of implementing this study. But Don, let me go ahead and turn it over to you so that you can provide council with a summary of how you approach this. Yep, I was gonna say apologies, Don, but we're not hearing you.
It's okay, we're lip readers.
I think he's muted.
Yep.
So far, we agree with everything he said.
Don, we still can't hear you. I apologize. You know what?
Looks like he's got two sessions open. He's got two sessions open. One's muted, one's not. Which one is he actually using? See, he's there and he's there.
Which one? This is the other one? Okay.
And then it's allow mic. Oh, there we go. It should be. So it's allowing the mic on his end.
Yeah.
And we tested earlier with him and we could hear him just fine.
Is he muted on his side?
He's muted and it won't come unmuted.
All right. So, Don, I'm going to go ahead and say thank you so much for being on here. Since we're not able to get the technical difficulties figured out, I'm just going to go ahead and make the presentation from your report. And then if there's any follow-up questions or concerns, we'll follow back around with you. But apologies for not being able to kind of get that worked out.
Nice meeting you, Don.
He took it very well.
Yeah,
Nice talking with you.
it,
Agree with
very
everything.
well said.
Yeah, right.
So just to give you kind of some high-level data points, one of the reasons why we contracted with the Management Advisory Group is because they have extensive experience performing this type analysis, not only in the state of South Carolina, but really throughout very large portions of the East Coast. They've most recently completed studies for Jasper County, Beaufort County, and a number of other municipalities throughout the Low Country. And so the intent of this was to identify all of the positions within the city of Hardeeville to get specific job descriptions for each position so that they could go out and compare those positions to other similarly situated jurisdictions. And so one of the things I wanted to emphasize is the amount and variety of areas that they studied in terms of compensation. So they covered the city of Beaufort, city of Charleston, town of Hilton Head, town of Bluffton. Those are all local employers within our region, as you're aware. And then we asked them to look at similarly situated jurisdictions across the state. And what I mean by that is areas that are more of a suburban nature, but they're close to metropolitan areas and that are growing at a fast rate. And so we have the city of Fountain Inn, city of Moncks Corner, the city of Simpsonville, the city of Woodruff, all as what I would argue are similarly situated jurisdictions because they are rapidly growing suburban areas across the state of South Carolina. And then we also looked at other jurisdictions in our region, but not necessarily in South Carolina, but people that we may lose employees to or organizations that we may gain employees from. And so that included the city of Savannah, the city of Pooler, Port Wentworth, Jasper County, Beaufort County, Colleton County, Charleston County, and the Bluffton Township Fire District. So we asked them to cast a very wide net in looking at other data points to make sure that what we're recommending will ensure that we are competitive for all of our staff members. They also looked at, in addition to finding benchmarks for compensation, we asked them to look at our current payroll and identify compression-related issues. Compression-related issues arise from when we hire an employee at a specific rate and that employee remains in that position for several years. If we go to hire a new employee with that same classification, we end up paying the new employee close to the same amount that we're paying the existing employee who had been there for several years. And so one of the things that we asked them to do was to go through our existing payroll structure and identify where we had compression and make recommendations on adjustments that we could make to eliminate those concerns. So on the one hand, we've received kind of that baseline salary report for all of our positions, and we've asked them to make adjustments to eliminate compression. And so both of those are combined in this report as part of the recommendations for implementation that are coming forward. So, are there any questions about why we selected MAG, how they went about pulling this data, or how they went about providing this report to us? Okay. If there's no questions about how we formulated this, let me go ahead and bring Pam up to talk about what the recommendations from the study are proposing.
Okay. From the study, they proposed that we adopt a formal compensation philosophy, which was needed. So we adopted that, and it's been posted on our website.
I'm,
Oh, you can't hear me? I'm
yeah,
sorry.
that's better.
Okay. So one of the recommendations was that we adopt a formal compensation philosophy. We didn't have that before. We thought that was necessary, so we did adopt the philosophy and post that to our website. That was just needed. Part of what came out of it was a separate proposed pay plan for our public safety staff and then for our regular staff. So what they did was they separated out our fire, police, our public safety staff. They're on a different proposed pay plan for what we should be offering them upon enter, what the minimum, mid, and max should be. And then our regular staff has their own own pay plan proposed. And for about 170 of our employees, it is recommended that we do a 3.5% increase to bring them to the minimum of the new proposed pay plan.
3.5% increase. Now, is that going to be budgetarily what we see bottom line?
Yes, sir.
Or is there merit going in on top of that?
So that's a question that you all ultimately will need to help us answer. What I believe in terms of priority is that adopting and implementing the recommendations from this report is at least my highest priority. And the reason for that is I believe that this helps us set the benchmark about where we should be from a salary and compensation standpoint for our employees. And so I'm looking at this as this is what starts us on the discussion of our salary and compensation. It is not the end of that discussion. And so based upon the report that MAG has put together, I believe 170 of our 170 employees would see some level of adjustment. So it is not a flat 3.5% across the board for all staff, but it is a generalized 3.5% in order to bring them to the entry-level baseline that they are recommending. That would be, again, my recommendation to implement now. Whether we do merit on top of that would be based upon not only the financial position of the city, our revenues and where we're looking for, but ultimately from a policy standpoint, how comfortable you feel given that we're recommending this. So I think we've talked about it in our small groups, but I'll kind of clearly articulate what my position is on this, which is my priority is first and foremost to implement this study because I think it's necessary to establish that baseline. My second priority would be to adopt the PTO schedule change that we discussed previously as part of the handbook update. Lastly, it would be a merit increase. And I certainly understand that at some point in time, we're going to reach a cutoff point where you no longer feel comfortable. I'm just not sure where it's at yet. And so from the merit standpoint, that would be a discussion as part of next year's budget development. What I'm proposing with this is that we look at implementing it now, again, to establish that baseline.
One of the reasons I asked, and this came up last year as well, first of all, in the state budget, what I read, it's 2%.
Yes, sir.
Now, they didn't make clear whether that was 2% for COLA and then there's going to be something on top of it. But I interpreted the statement as 2% as total. I think we also need to know what others are doing.
Yes, sir.
I don't want to get to a situation where we had a few years back where we gave a much higher rate than than our neighbors.
Yes, sir.
So I think that, you don't have to answer it now, but I think that question, when we get to approving a budget and the bottom line, that question will come forward and you'll
Yes, sir.
have to be prepared.
And that's where we've heard from the state, because they typically get their budget numbers out a little bit sooner. We will survey the other jurisdictions around our area, because my goal is not only to keep us competitive, but also keep us comparable. Because you're right, if we're proposing something that seems disproportionate to what other communities are doing, it's going to be difficult for us to justify that to the public unless we have some other information that we haven't talked about. So it's hard for me to answer that question as we stand here, but it is something that we will definitely look at as we start developing next year's budget.
I didn't expect an answer because I know it's early in the process, but it's certainly going to be a question that I will have.
Yes, sir.
When we get to it.
Yep. And again, we have to look at this as cumulative. And so when we add one, and then we add two, and then we add three, it moves the needle each time.
Yeah, and I think last year Mrs. Guzman brought up, you know, she compared it to what the military was
Yes.
getting. And so.
And I believe we
just-
were in line with both the military, the state's adjustment, and there was maybe a little bit of variation from other, but I think we were
Yeah,
kind of
I think
square in
we
the
were-
average.
We were pretty comparable to the rest of the region
Yes, sir.
last year.
Just for clarity then, what you're recommending then is we move our baseline. It's nothing more, at this point, nothing more than baseline.
That is what I believe this study does, is it resets our baseline to a benchmark that we believe is comparable, and Pam referenced our compensation philosophy. My goal is for us to be at the 51st percentile. So we're not in the middle, we are just slightly ahead of the middle to give us that little bit of edge against our competitors. Because what this study is showing is, if we had to go to the market and hire a person, let's just say a land planner with 10 years of experience, this study is telling us what we are likely to have to pay in order to bring that person in. Knowing where we are as an organization and where we're going, and that we are going to continue to grow our head count, we are going to continue to add staff because of the increase in population and the demand on services, this benchmark becomes our starting point. What we then have to do is make sure that every year we are maintaining that competitiveness by keeping us at the 51st percentile. Now, that is going to be subject to budgetary constraints. If we have a recession or if we have a downturn, obviously that's one of the first things that you look at having to roll back, because you just don't have the funding to pay for it. But a study like this really should be done every 5 to 7 years to set the baseline, and then you look at doing annual adjustments thereafter to maintain that competitiveness.
If we as a council, if we pass this, when will this be initiated?
So if there is support for what we are proposing, and again, I want to bring John up here to talk about the financial implications of this, but if there's support from council after we've talked about that, my goal would be to introduce a budget amendment, because ultimately we've adopted this year's budget. We would introduce a budget amendment to you that, if approved, would adjust the budget for the remaining several months that we have, and then those changes would be rolled into next year's budget development at this time.
Okay, because that was going to be my next question is this an affordable stance to take at this time? I'm not a real big fan of budget amendments, especially one that could be as large as what we're talking here.
Yes, sir.
We haven't heard that number yet.
Yep, so it's a great segue into going ahead and discussing that. So
All
John,
right, thank you.
Pam, are you done?
Yeah.
Okay. Hello again. Mr. Mayor, to your comment, the finance directors throughout the region do share what they're proposing and what they think is going to get approved. And Mr. Gruber and I have already talked about continuing the process of doing that, including that in our budget. And we'd also talked about what he touched on, which was, we don't know what we may or may not propose for salary increases until we put together the whole budget. And our meetings with the department heads start next week. And then that's when we really start beating ourselves and each other up to get to something that Mr. Gruber can recommend to you in the middle of April. So I just wanted to say that before I get started. It is not. Yes, there it is.
There you go.
Thank you. So again, I just got a couple of slides. Jump in if we need to do anything. The first couple, again, have already been touched. We've got, MAG, Josh talked through about what MAG did, what we hired them to do. You see that the city manager had asked a number of staff to review this as we were getting information from them. And then what we're here to talk about is that fourth bullet, which is what is the timing and implementation of the MAG report, and what would it look like if we did it in fiscal year 26, and then what is the impact of doing this in 26? What is that going to look? And I think, Mr. Mearsman, this was your question. What is that going to look like down the road? Hopefully, when I'm done these couple of slides, I'll have answered both of those questions to your satisfaction. And just a little bit of background. If you remember when we got last year's audit report, the city had anticipated that we would have a increase in general fund balance. That increase was $6.1 million, where staff had only projected a $4.5 million. So again, we did add some funds to the bank for that. And Mr. Mearsman, to your question, Josh's challenge to me was, do we have recurring revenue that is going to be able to support what it is we're bringing to you today? And the answer to that is that second bullet, which is licenses and permits last year were $1,052,000 or 12% greater than they were, and we're not seeing anything that's going to indicate that we're going to fall off of that. Again, if there's a recession or something like that, we don't know that, but if we keep on doing what we're doing, we don't see those numbers falling off at all.
So,
Yes, sir.
go back.
I'm trying.
Well, I wrote the numbers down. There's
There we go.
one, so we have in the general fund, an excess of 1.6 million that we projected, plus license and permanent is $1,052,000. So that's 2,652,000
No, sir.
more.
The 1.6 million, which is 1.6 million more than we anticipated adding last year. We added 6.1. That $1,052,000 would be figured into that 6.1 million increase for last year's budget.
Okay, so the 1.2 is part of the increase of 1.6.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
About $500,000 was non-recurring money. The other million is in recurring funds. But those were above and beyond expectations.
But bottom line budget, I guess is what I'm asking. We have $1.6 million more than our budget called for.
Yes.
Last,
They include that, part of that $1.6 million is $1 million from fees and permits.
Correct. We were anticipating growing our general fund balance by $4.5 million. By the time the year ended, we'd grown it by $6.1 million.
So we have $1.6 million more than we anticipated.
Correct.
And of
But
that-
that's,
That's it. And of that $1.6 million, $1 million of it is in recurring
Okay.
revenues and $500,000 is non-recurring.
okay, so we,
I'm sorry, Mr. Mearsman, it looked like you were, okay. Okay. So the next thing is, this is just what I would consider, at least for my purposes, the key page of what the MAG report gave us. And you can see, we've already talked about, there was a 3.5% adjustment proposed. There was some adjustments to minimum, and then there were adjustments to compression. Their total change number was the $818,444. And that's really where the finance team's work started as we prepared for this presentation. You'll see we took that 818,444, and we know that that is going to be spread out over 26 payrolls. We added 7.65% for FICA. We added the state retirement, and then the first responders retirements to that. And the impact over a full year for what MAG is suggesting is $1,042,362. So then I took that, divided it by 26, because that's how many payrolls we have in a year, and it comes out to just over $40,000. So then what the city manager is recommending is that we would bring to you a budget amendment for $280,000. You see that in the box at the right. That is the 7 payrolls from April 10th through the pay period that includes June 30th. So it's 7 payrolls. So 7 times 40 is $281,000. We would bring to you a budget amendment, first reading with a planned first reading on the 5th of March, second reading on the 19th. If it's approved, that does give Pam and members of my team and the department heads and Josh the opportunity to process all of our paperwork. That is at this point still a very manual process where everybody ends up leaving with a signed piece of paper that's been signed by 3 or 4 different people, indicating that their salary went from X to Y or their hourly rate went from X to Y. And people have become accustomed to that. We tried not to do it a couple of years ago, and the first thing we got was a bunch of phone calls about, oh, I heard I got a raise. So, I mean, I don't know what we're going to do. But so right now the plan is to continue doing that. Anyway, saying all that to say, that gives us the opportunity to make this, assuming council agrees and wants us to bring that forward on the 5th and then the 19th, that this is what it would look like. It would be an increase in the budget of $280,000 for the current year. So that answers if we did it in 26, what does it look like? And then the annualized payroll for fiscal 26 is $13,733,000. And you saw on the previous slide, the annual implementation cost of that is $280,000 for those 7 weeks. For a year, it's $1,042,632.
My question for John was, the $1,042,000, what is the percentage of that of our overall payroll? Because we do have to include the retirement basis and FICA and everything else in there. We look at a number of $818K, and that's just cash dollars out. But total expense is the $1,042,000.
Yes, sir.
But what is the percentage of that of our total payroll? Our total payroll is what, 13 million?
Yeah, so it would be the
7.6.
it would be the 1 million divided by the 13.
The only reason I'm asking these questions is if we as a council are asked them, we have to be able to provide.
Sure, and we can,
I'm not disputing anything.
no, sir, I understand that. But as we get through this, if there's, a one-page talking points that you would like finance and city manager to prepare, we're certainly happy to do that.
That would be an excellent idea.
Okay. So that's what I had, except for, Mr. Gruber, you're gonna make your pitch now, I guess?
No, I just,
Okay.
I kind of mentioned before, this to me is my priority to you to implement. As compared to anything else, I think this, again, because it's a foundational piece for us, that's why I'm presenting it to you. And given what we've presented about our financial position, I believe it's something that we can implement realistically without overextending ourselves and without becoming uncomfortable.
May I make a comment? I think setting that competition 51st percentile is strategically wise because we're 50% above, 50% below, and that makes us really strategically in a good position. And I think that's a wise, to do less,
Yeah.
I think would be really a recruitment challenge, and to do more would be, I think, unnecessary. So I think that 50 percentile makes a lot of sense to me.
Thank you. And I'll tell you, the way we kind of monitor where we're at is evaluating when we have a position that comes open, how long does it take us to fill that position, and what qualities are we getting out of the candidate that we're able to bring in. Right now, I believe we're competitive, and I hope this keeps us in that same spot. But we have to be careful that we're not getting out ahead of ourselves because realistically, we have a lot to offer beyond just salary and compensation. We are very much an up-and-coming community. That means if you get involved in our organization now, you have opportunities for upward movement within your career field, because as we continue to grow, we'll need to have more layers of staff within our organization. And so this is a great tool in our toolbox, but it's by no means the only thing that we have to offer to bring and retain employees.
Couple of comments. I'll be Debbie Downer. First of all, we have an extra $1.6 million, whatever. Okay. One of the justifications in our debate last year about not giving a tax decrease was the fact that, we have so many capital things to do. So we can't give a tax decrease so now we have extra money, we're going to give it away and not use it towards all the things we have to do. Okay, so I support the compensation package, start, middle. That's just wise. Every place I ever worked had a similar kind of setup. But where I struggle is why we have the need to do it before the budget year starts. I struggle with that. Have a tax decrease. Put it towards the fire station we need. If the justification is we need the money for CIP, now why isn't that justification being applied here? My personal thing would be, how I feel about tax reduction. So, because I believe that when we're doing good, everyone should benefit, including the taxpayer. Okay, we're leaving them out all the last year for the first time in 12 years. So, what I would say is start at the budget year. Start at July 1st. Okay, because you're talking about bottom line 7.6% increase in our payroll. That's not 3.5. Okay, and I would challenge that based on what everybody else is getting in the neighborhood, especially if we're competitive now. Then let's and if we have to stage it so we don't have a large number in 1 year, that would be my suggestion. And I know everybody's out there cursing me under their breath, but that's just how I feel about it. Because as was said in last year's budget hearings, we have a lot of things we have to do, and so perhaps some of that excess money should be put towards all those needs.
Yes, sir. To that point, and just within the $1.6 million that we're looking at, I was making a distinction between the recurring revenues and the non-recurring revenues for a reason, because the non-recurring revenues are exactly what we've been identifying for use in our CIP program. And so part of that number that came in, was $500,000 from the nickel plate settlement. Again, funds that we weren't necessarily anticipating receiving because we knew that they were out there. We just didn't know when it was going to be resolved. And so those were funds that came in above expectations. And as we discussed, we put a portion of that into our rainy day fund, and then we put the remaining portions of that into our capital improvement program. And so I do think that we are trying to address both of those things. When it comes to the timing of the implementation, the reason why I'm requesting that you consider implementing it now is because we possess the report, and the report tells us that if we want to remain competitive in terms of paying our staff, that we should be paying them what the report indicates. And so I understand that certainly from a policy standpoint, if you think it's more appropriate to incorporate it in next year's budget, we'll absolutely do that. But I do think that there's justification to at least make the request to you today if you want to then consider that.
Well, me personally, wait till the budget year.
Understood.
And then if we have an extra, it's 3 months or less, 7 weeks. I'd say wait and take that money, and we'll decide when we have the whole picture, the whole budget, to decide where that we want to spend that extra $1.6 million.
Certainly.
And I think that's the proper time to put it in rather than a budget amendment. I agree with Mr. Mearsman. I'm uncomfortable with that.
My question, Josh, is reoccurring and non-reoccurring. So from what I'm hearing then is our reoccurring is only $800,000.
It's just over a million,
Just over a million. And that just barely would cover this increase that we're talking about. And I do agree with the mayor on some concerns about this. It looks good right now, and we don't have that crystal ball that we know what the future is going to bring. A lot of things can happen. Nothing may happen in that time. But I do think it may be prudent to wait until the budget comes around, especially since we are so close to that time frame right now.
Sure. And that's why we have this discussion.
And there again, this is all about transparency to the public. They might have questioned why we are doing this prior to knowing what our budget is going to be. The departments have yet to submit them, and we know there's going to be some increases in our budget that are non-personnel, equipment, other things like that. We just don't know. We have a lot of irons in the fire right now, and until we identify what all those irons are and a priority with them, I would feel more comfortable waiting until the budget time.
Understood.
I just have a question. What, Harry, excuse me, thank you. I just have a question. I think the points that both have been made are good ones. But the opposite side of that question for me is, doing what we've suggested, does that create any kind of hardship for you that we may not be aware of? My sense is it isn't, because the time is short, but I think it's an important question to ask, just in case we're not aware of something.
Yep. I don't think there's necessarily any difficulties for me if we look at implementing this as part of the adoption of next year's budget. Just from a timing standpoint, it's a couple of months difference. Now, again, I'm making the request because I think it's establishing that baseline, and the fact that we possess it means that we should do something with it. So along those lines, what I think would be detrimental to the organization is knowing that we have these recommendations from the report and not implementing them. That, to me, is a morale killer for the organization, because we've told staff we possess information that says you should likely be paying more for the position that you're in order to keep us competitive, but we're not going to do that. And so that, to me, is what I need to avoid. But as far as just delaying it and including it as part of implementation of next year's budget, I don't see any issues with that.
The only thing I would like to add to doing it sooner is my experience over the years. If you have a deficit in compensations or baselines, it's almost impossible to make those up, because you have guidelines in terms of the maximum amount of increases you can give people. So once you get a person in that situation who might be a very good employee, it creates a situation that is hard to fix without some major policy deviance. And so there's the other side to what you're doing, which I understand and makes sense.
Yes,
So I just want to throw that out.
Okay.
Josh, just to be clear with all the staff, I agree with the compensation study's recommendations, but I do prefer to wait until budget time.
Understood.
I
Understand the
I
big
agree
picture.
with what you're saying. Saying no could be detrimental. I'm not saying no. I'm just saying, for the public's perception and everybody else's, I'd feel much more comfortable waiting until budget to do it.
Understood.
And since I agree with that, do you want a straw poll here?
No, I think the impression that I'm getting is that, so what would have been the next step is, if you were supportive of it, we would have introduced an ordinance to effectuate the budget amendment. But knowing that you've expressed some concerns with timing and wanting to see that bigger picture in the overall budgetary impact, we won't introduce that, but we'll look at incorporating these recommendations into my budget proposal when I present it to you in April, I believe is when we're scheduled to present it. Yeah. Okay.
Okay,
Okay. Thank you very much.
thank you.
All right, so the last item that we have today is talking about our wetland buffer ordinance. And so I'm going to ask Katie and Brianna to go ahead and come on up, and they'll lead this discussion, and I'll come back up there and join y'all.
I hate to do this since you walked all the way up here, but can we take 5 minutes?
Oh, sure. We got to pull it up anyway.
Okay.
No fucking. I appreciate a chance to talk about wetland buffers again, since we've been enjoying this topic. We did have the opportunity to, yes, enjoy. We had the opportunity to meet with Mr. Mearsman and discuss some things, and knowing that we are heading to getting this ordinance adopted and what we really think need to be happen, we looked a lot at the science, and so I'm going to do a review and a proposal on what we would like to take to Planning Commission. So as discussed previously, we consider other ordinances, and we wanted to look at what were the best practices across the board. We want to put standards in place so that there's no questions any longer as to what it applies to, how it applies. We will go to the Planning Commission, and this will go to the Land Development Regulations section of the MZDO. Therefore, all the questions about development agreements and everything, the land development regulations are applied as they are amended. So they will be included in that. It will not be part of the zoning. It'll be part of the land development regulations. Our MZDO has those two separate documents, and this is going well, like stormwater and those types of things. So then we would continue through council, and this will apply to new applications once adopted. Development agreements that are already in place, it will only apply to new master plans or development permits as a part of those. Example I just said to Katie, Riverton Point, this is not going to apply to Riverton Point because they are already master planned and established, but some of the new ones coming in, the new master plans that we haven't considered yet. So as have master plan approval and land disturbance permits. We've talked about regional examples. I did get a little bit more clarification on a couple of these. Bluffton's, as we discussed, does not apply to the development agreements. Theirs is also under review to be amended. I'm not sure exactly what direction they're going in, but they are currently working on that. Greenville County, Josh explained to us what riparian buffer meant, but what does that really apply to? What it is they don't have wetlands. They don't have swampy areas in Greenville like we have here. They have streams and waterways. So their buffer applies to streams and state waters. That's exactly what it applies to. So if it's a jurisdictional stream, then it's going to apply. If it's just a bog, it's not necessarily going to. It also applies to all new developments. There is a portion of Greenville County that is unzoned, and that is really where they're having most of their concern with this when these new developments coming into that unzoned area. So that's where it mainly applies to the outlying areas. Savannah, 35 jurisdictional, can be reduced and averaged. In Georgetown County, we talked about their pending on their areas as well. Purpose of this ordinance, we discussed, we want to protect the environment, we want to protect our wetlands, we want to prevent future detriments and flooding and all the different wildlife buffers, wildlife refuges, and everything that we have. We want to make sure that we're clear with affirmative requirements and monitor reporting and enforcement. We want to make sure we have all of these positive things in here so that we're clear and there's not questions every time we come bring you a master plan. We talked a lot about the science again. I wanted to leave this slide in here just to show that we were looking at all of the criteria. That's where we came up with the 35 feet that we're going to be recommending. The 35-foot buffer, not averaged, is coming out of this science. The buffers over 30 feet will remove pollutants more consistently, and that's where we're going for it. So we looked at different approaches: fixed non-disturbance buffer with additional setbacks. That's basically what we are looking at, because we do have setbacks. We also have buffers. We would like that non-disturbed buffer as what we are looking at. A lot of places have the case-by-case determination, but we want to give those factors in there with the regulated buffer area with a minimum non-disturbance. Proposed for Hardyville MZDO wetland buffers, 35-foot minimum off of jurisdictional wetlands, no averages. If it's a jurisdictional wetland, you're gonna have a 35-foot minimum. And the utilities will not be allowed within that undisturbed. That's another place that is crept up in our problems before, is we have to make way for BJWSA or others, as we have seen here recently. It is going to be located in Land Development Regulations, administration and interpretation by the Staff Review Committee. So that's not just a one-person deal. It's the committee with multi-discipline. Allow activities within the buffer. Recreation, replanting can only be native species, non-species. I don't know what that one is. So everything built in there to maintain the look, maintain the feel, maintain the protections that we have in our native development. So our next steps, we'll draft and submit to Planning Commission for regulation. Recommendation. I'm not sure if we're going to make the March one. We potentially will make the March Planning Commission. If I can get through budget this week, we will then forward it to Planning Commission for review, public input, and adoption. So that's the overview of what we're going to do, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
We've had a lot of recent examples. First of all, I should say I like going from the 25 to 35 foot. It's based on evaluations of other areas, but I think it is a positive step, that we're taking. So I applaud your recommendation. But we've had a number of situations, including we're going through another one right now, and this is not just wetlands buffers, but with buffers. As we see property A, they want to maximize their land usage, and they build up to their property line with what is now a 25-foot buffer. Then, years later, somebody else comes in, and they want to build up to their property line with a 25-foot buffer. And we know, especially with land disturbance, we're seeing more and more, recent examples included, where that total of 50 feet is, you can see more through that with these planted pines and the underbrush than, a fence would give you more privacy than 50 feet. It just, even 100 feet, 150 feet, you see it along Argent Boulevard. It's not a lot, especially with thin pines and small underbrush. So, where am I headed with that? Should we also, since we're doing this, should we also be looking at that 25-foot buffer that always gets thrown back in our face on every development? And that's a general question to anybody.
And we also, one thing on that is a lot of those, that is a zoning point when you're talking about those buffers. We're not talking about land development regulations for those buffers.
Right, but that's part of the MZDO, right?
It's part of the MZDO, but with the development agreements that are in place, we're less likely to be able to change those in the future, the ones that have already been adopted.
I think maybe a better way to state it is we could certainly look at amending those standards if you want to create greater buffers, but from an applicability standpoint, that's likely to only apply to new developments that are coming in.
Yes, sir.
If you have an existing development agreement, because the fact that when we give them a PDD, it sets the zoning and it no longer then follows the MZDO, it follows the PDD.
Right.
That is the standards that can't be changed, but it could be applied to new developments coming in.
So here's what I'm thinking. Let's say if everybody agrees that 25 feet in most cases is not a real big difference, and both sides are building to their property line. What if we changed it, and the reason I'm bringing it up now is maybe just do one thing, you know, do them both at the same time, if that makes any sense. And then, once you have the new standard in place, you can't make anybody, but you sure can ask, right? And, you know, here's our new standard. We'd like you to, and then,
Comply with our new standard.
and the worst that can happen, they say no. But at least if we put a new standard in, we have a basis for asking the question. Right now, we don't.
And Mayor, we can certainly do that, but the one thing I would caution you on then is if you make the ask and they say no, that can't be the basis then for denying their
Right,
request.
exactly.
That's
We
what
all
we have to be very careful
We all
about.
have to be,
Yeah.
understand it. But you know what? Active open spaces. That was sidewalks. We've asked a lot of things that it's not necessarily, are they legally bound to say yes, right?
Sidewalks, yes now, but,
Well,
yes, some of the other ones.
But what I'm saying is, if we have a standard, we should at least set it where we think it should be. And, you know, at some point in time, if we ask the question,
Katie and I will take some time and look into this, and come up with some ideas. I think one of the big points that we can do is by limiting what can go in these buffers and what can't go in these buffers. I think we're learning a lot from that over the years. Certainly, and I'll take with Clarios, a part of it was the BJWSA needed certain easements. Royal Oaks, same thing. And we can work on that and make sure that we are simple and clear and transparent.
That was the question I was going to ask, but I agree with what the mayor is saying. I mean, if we wrap this up into one, and with these PDDs that have already been approved and before they come with the master plan, if we say our best practices now recommend, they say no, they say no. But if we say this is our best practices now, you know, it puts the emphasis on them to say, no, I don't want to comply with best practices. You know, it puts the ball back in their court. The other question I have is, if you go back one, where it says about no utilities. I agree with not having developer utilities in that buffer, but if it's Beaufort Jasper Water Sewer or Dominion or whoever, those types, I don't want to.
We can work around it better.
Yeah.
instead
well,
of
that's-
just
that-
an after the
That's where I
fact.
want. I don't want the developer using it for their stormwater drainage or that kind of thing.
That's exactly why we put it in, and we can have some flexibility written in there for those utilities that you're talking about, but we see the stormwater infrastructure within the buffer areas is where a lot of the thinner buffer requirement comes from. So,
Yes.
because it has historically been allowed there. So that is exactly what we were hoping to eliminate from that.
Okay, and I'd like to thank you for the no average. I hate that thought of average. We've seen that, and that infuriates me.
Discussed it yesterday. for a while.
That's just a way of getting around what the true meaning of what we want to do. I think 35 feet is a workable, is reasonable also. So I thank you and staff very much for taking this on. It's something that we definitely needed to do.
Thank you.
So saying that 35 feet, that means they absolutely cannot touch any of those trees that's within that 35-foot buffer?
Unless it is for what we're saying, unless there's, sometimes the Army Corps and best management practices includes replanting of those native species and recreation. Sometimes you do want to have that ability if it is a usable area. So those are the two times that there could be some minor disturbance, but it'd be very minimal.
And of course, you guys are enforcing that 15 trees per acre.
Absolutely.
And yeah, because I'm just very curious to find out how it's going to be applicable to the one that we're discussing.
Is it 35 feet to be considered part of their open space requirement?
It's, right now, that would not, the way that our open space is written, no, that does not include it.
Let's make sure we continue that, because I don't want to,
So
I
we
don't
won't
want them
make
to
that
start
change in the
looking at that, because
MZDO.
you just said
Right.
like a walking trail or something like that. That stays out of their open space requirement.
Yes. And then the only other thing I wanted to add is, we did for Car Track, for instance, because it was in a more environmentally sensitive area of the city, we did put in additional. So if we get into a situation like that again, we can recommend a higher buffer.
Thank you.
But that was a new PDD that we
Yes.
created and an annexation.
Mm-hmm.
So that was, it wasn't a 20-year inheritance.
Right.
So we understand anything new, any new PDDs, it wouldn't, and that's why even if it's just a few things, let's put the standard in, and then we can have something we can hold people to that makes more sense.
Mayor, would the preference of council be to see this go forward or to put a pause on this while staff works at taking a look at our other buffer and setback standards and then bring something forward that's comprehensive? Or would you prefer that this, since it appears that we may have something here that you can support, would you want us to move this forward now while we work on that?
Personally, I think this wetland buffer should go in as quickly as we can.
Okay.
And, take your time with the other and do as thorough an analysis as you did with this.
Okay.
So that I wouldn't want to delay this indefinitely while you're doing the other
My
analysis.
fear would be somebody would try to push through before this window.
Yeah. So this will, because it's a change to our MZDO language, this will need to go through the planning commission, but that would be our first start. So we'll look to get this on the agenda for their next meeting, which means it'll probably show up on your council agenda at the April 1st, the first meeting in April.
And since this includes new DAs coming through, so that requirement is going to run with the land.
So I think it's a good opportunity to really kind of make sure that we're all on the same page. With the wetland buffer amendments, it would apply to existing development agreements, but not those that have an approved master plan.
Gotcha.
Okay. We don't have anything that would be considered under riparian rights. We have no title properties that currently within our jurisdiction.
We might, but I don't know that we regulate development based upon that classification. We basically have any wetlands buffer, which would include our riparian waterways, would fall under that, I believe.
I think with our terrain, with
Yeah.
what we have, we have wetlands around those.
Yes,
typically
that's probably-
that already buffer, like Katie mentioned Carr, with the New River headwaters. That would be one, but it's.
We've gone
protected.
beyond.
When I was in Beaufort, there came up to the tidal pond, who had jurisdiction? Did
Yes.
Beaufort County have that jurisdiction, or did Corps with the riparian rights? Was it 30 feet, or was it 50 feet, or was it 10 feet? And it got to be a huge issue. And I just, as we expand and grow, we may start seeing more of a possibility of having that.
I was gonna say, we may have some water bodies, but I think your statement is right, that most of our water bodies are surrounded by wetlands, and so we don't have like a river buffer setback, because we don't have a lot of property that is immediately adjacent to the water body.
Millstone
So
Landing would be
tidal is
really.
not included.
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a workshop question for council. I brought up at my report some time ago. I met this guy who's an architect, and he mentioned a term I never heard of before. It's called tactical urbanism. My question to staff and to council, would you would you like to hear a presentation? I don't know how long it would be, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. I guess we could make it as long as we want it to be. But I can invite this person or not invite him, but I should give him an answer one way or the other. Any thoughts from council? Would you like to?
I think,
I thought it was. That's why I brought it up. I thought, given the fact that, we have set White Hardy Boulevard as a higher priority this year, perhaps we can learn something from it. And also, I am meeting Thursday, a follow-up meeting after my tour at SCAD, and I brought this up on a report as well. There's a whole lot of talent 30 minutes away. And, it would be free, it would be a student, and as somebody said, I think it was Val, said to me, look what they did in Savannah. They helped Savannah refurbish a lot of things. So I'd like to just plant the seed, and maybe we could have them come in, someone, and I can ask this guy that I'm meeting with Thursday, and see what ways they can help us. Who knows? Why not? They have. I'm amazed by the amount of talent they have over there. I didn't realize it.
We've tapped into them for internship opportunities.
Yeah.
And we'll continue to foster that pipeline.
That's is Jay from Jay's from SCAD, right? Bright young man. I mean, and how do we expand on
And he
to
needed
that?
to get the credit in order to graduate and complete his program, so it's a win-win.
So
Yep.
there might be other areas. I mean, our media department's doing phenomenal work. And they have an animation department. There's so many like Jay. I just would encourage us to use it. And Josh, if you want to, if you think there's something that the council would benefit from having somebody from SCAD, I would make that part of a workshop as
Yes, sir.
well.
I was going to say, if I can work with you to get some contact information, would love to invite them. And maybe let's, as a placeholder, let's plan on having a 15-minute presentation from the tactical urbanism gentleman and potentially SCAD at our March workshop date.
So the Tuesday or Thursday this week, I'm meeting with this gentleman I met, Brian Gilbert. He's from SCAD. He's coming in as a follow-up. I forget what department he is, but I can invite one other council member. So, of course, Mayor Pro Tem has first dibs if one of you want to join me in that meeting. And this is just a follow-up to see, potential collaboration areas. And Josh, of course, you don't have any quorum restrictions, so if you want to come in as well, or send Neil or Matt, they'll be here at 2:00 on Thursday.
I have guests coming in from out of town.
Okay, so that goes to the next Mayor Pro Tem. Val, if you'd like to join us this coming Thursday at 2:00.
The 25th, 26th?
26.
Okay, I'm wide open. I'll
All right, it's
So where is it going to take place?
right here,
Right here.
City Hall, about an hour, because I have a show to go to that night, so it won't be long.
What time is it, sir?
My show,
Yeah, we want to go too.
2:00. 2:00 here on Thursday.
Thank you. Oh.
There's one other meeting and I hope I'm not talking out of, but I can do whatever I want. So I'll start with Mayor Pro Tem again. 3 p.m. Tuesday here. Warren Waters, he's the guy who's doing White Hardy Boulevard.
Tuesday, can I let you know in a few hours?
Yeah, that, you know, again, we'll go, it's not that, you know, I'm trying to include, you know, instead of just doing these meetings myself, I'll put, I'm gonna put them out there for you, and we'll go down in order of Mayor Pro Tems. And you're welcome. If you don't want to, you don't have to.
I'll let you know in a few hours.
Okay. That's all I have. My stomach's growling. I don't know about anybody else. If you'd like to adjourn, I'll accept the motion. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye. Thank you all.